My name is Olivia Ramirez, and for 8 years, I gave everything I had to Wallace and Kane Consulting. I was one of the youngest senior project managers in our Chicago office, known for my ability to juggle massive client portfolios, calm down angry VPs, and turn chaos into profit. I wasn't born into wealth or privilege. I grew up in Joliet, raised by a single mom who cleaned houses during the day and took night classes just to keep food on the table. That woman taught me 2 things: never depend on anyone who makes you feel small, and always leave the room smarter than when you entered it. That's why I worked twice as hard, stayed twice as late, and never said no to a challenge. People noticed. My boss, Greg Whitman, especially noticed. He liked to call me his right hand, but what I didn't realize back then was that I was more like a shield, one he would hide behind until the storm passed and then discard when the sun came out again. Greg was charming in the way all career manipulators are: sharp suits, confident smile, the kind of guy who remembered your dog's name but forgot to give credit where it was due. He played the game well. Upper management adored him, clients found him persuasive, and he had a knack for passing off other people's work as his own. I didn't mind in the beginning. I told myself that's just how it worked in corporate America. You help your boss look good, they pull you up with them. But Greg never pulled. He only pushed. The breaking point began on a rainy Monday morning in late October, when Greg stormed into my office looking like a man on the verge of a panic attack. He tossed a stack of folders onto my desk, his usual swagger replaced by desperation. "I need your help, Liv," he said, not even waiting for me to greet him. "The Hawthorne account is on fire, and if I lose it, I'm finished. This could cost the company millions, and my job." The Hawthorne account was one of our biggest clients, a real estate conglomerate with contracts in half the country. They were threatening to walk after delays in deliverables and budgeting errors, mistakes Greg had personally overseen but now wanted me to clean up. I scanned the documents, realizing that this wasn't just a few missed deadlines, this was a disaster in slow motion. And he wanted me to fix it, fast. I should have said no. I should have walked away that second and let him burn for his incompetence. But instead, I nodded. "Give me a week," I told him. "And stay out of my way." That week turned into 3. I worked 12-hour days, sometimes more, rewriting proposals, renegotiating contracts, meeting with vendors, smoothing over client anger, and even flying out to New York to personally walk Hawthorne's CEO through the revised strategy. I barely slept. I ate protein bars at my desk. My boyfriend left me after the second week. He said he was tired of being second place to a company that didn't care about me. I didn't argue. I didn't even have the energy to cry. But I fixed it. I turned everything around. Hawthorne stayed. The CEO sent a glowing letter of appreciation to the partners. Greg got a standing ovation at the quarterly meeting for his leadership during the crisis. I got a Starbucks gift card and a thanks for stepping up email that didn't even have my name spelled right. I should have seen it coming then. But I didn't. Not until 6 weeks later, when HR scheduled a routine performance review on my calendar. That meeting was anything but routine. I walked into the conference room expecting the usual check-in. Instead, I was met with Greg and a stone-faced HR director named Candace, who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. Greg had that same fake concern in his eyes that I'd seen him use on clients. He folded his hands neatly and said, "Olivia, this is a tough conversation. With the firm restructuring and budget cuts, we've had to make some difficult choices. Your role is being eliminated effective immediately." I blinked, confused. "Eliminated? You're firing me?" "It's not personal," he said smoothly. "This is coming from higher up." I turned to Candace, who wouldn't meet my eyes. "This is a mistake," I said, my voice steady despite the panic bubbling in my chest. "I just saved the firm's biggest account." Greg didn't flinch. "We appreciate everything you've done. Truly. But this is a strategic decision." I wanted to scream. Instead, I stood, numb and shaking, and walked out. No goodbye party. No chance to gather my things. My access badge deactivated before I even hit the parking lot. I spent the next week curled up in my apartment, replaying every moment like a broken tape. How did I not see it? Greg used me to fix his mess, then cut me loose to save face. I was the sacrifice he made to look like a leader during layoffs. He got promoted 2 weeks later, senior regional director. That should have been the end. But it wasn't. Because while Greg moved on like I never existed, I started digging. I remembered things: odd invoices, closed-door meetings, whispers of favoritism, misreported project metrics. I began making calls, talking to old clients, reaching out to former coworkers who had also been restructured. And what I started to uncover made my blood run cold. Greg's sins weren't just personal. They were professional. And possibly criminal. That's when I stopped crying and started planning. Grief is a strange thing. It doesn't just arrive with tears and sleepless nights, it shows up as silence, long stretches of emptiness where your mind races, but your body won't move. That's where I lived for the first few days after getting fired. The disbelief burned hotter than the rage. I wasn't just angry that Greg used me, I was humiliated that I let him. That I played the good soldier, worked myself to the bone, and still got discarded like I was nothing. But after a week of watching daytime TV and eating peanut butter out of the jar, I snapped. I opened my laptop, dusted off my old files, backup project folders, emails, client notes, budget drafts. I had always been meticulous. It was one of the reasons I was good at my job. Greg had hated that about me, called it overkill more than once. But now, that overkill was my greatest weapon. I started with the Hawthorne account. That mess Greg dumped on me? I remembered the discrepancies I spotted in the expense reports, vendor fees that didn't match actual invoices, inflated supply costs, and a mysterious consulting charge listed under strategic advisory that I never approved. At the time, I assumed it was sloppy bookkeeping. Now I saw it for what it was: fraud. I cross-referenced everything I had with internal budget summaries I'd saved. Greg's version didn't just exaggerate performance numbers, it falsified them. I remembered a phone call he had taken on speaker by accident, where someone said, "You need to make those numbers look clean before they go to the board." I hadn't thought much of it then. But now? It was a clue. By the third day of digging, I created a folder titled Insurance. Inside it were spreadsheets, timelines, email screenshots, and notes. I labeled each one with names, dates, and possible violations. It wasn't just about Greg's betrayal anymore. It was about justice, corporate, financial, and personal. I reached out to Sarah, a former coworker and junior analyst who had left the company 3 months before me. We'd always gotten along. She met me at a quiet cafe in River North, wearing oversized sunglasses like we were doing something illegal. When I told her what I'd found, her lips parted slowly in surprise. "You're not the only one," she whispered. I got pushed out after raising questions about Greg's Q2 numbers. HR told me I had an attitude problem. That was all the confirmation I needed. Greg had a pattern. He was burying mistakes under charisma and pushing out anyone who got close to the truth. "You ever hear of someone named Veronica Mays?" I asked. Sarah nodded. "Yeah, she was in compliance. She left suddenly, remember?" I remembered. She was gone within a week of sending an internal memo about misallocated budget reports. Suddenly, it was all connecting. Greg had been covering his tracks for years, and anyone who got close, Veronica, Sarah, even me, was silenced or eliminated. I needed more. And I needed protection. So I reached out to a lawyer friend I knew from college, Evelyn Brooks. She worked in employment and whistleblower law now. I didn't tell her everything right away, just enough to test the waters. I explained I had documents suggesting financial misconduct and retaliatory termination. Evelyn didn't blink. "You might have a Sarbanes-Oxley case on your hands. You could blow this wide open, Liv." I wasn't ready for court just yet. What I wanted first was revenge. I wanted Greg to feel what I felt, powerless, disrespected, discarded. But most of all, I wanted him exposed. So I called in a favor. My cousin Nadia worked in IT security for a different consulting firm, one of Wallace & Kane's biggest competitors. She knew enough about data trails, internal platforms, and how to navigate firewalls without getting noticed. Over dinner one night, I explained what I was doing. She stared at me for a long moment and said, "You're either a genius or a little crazy." "Maybe both," I said. Nadia didn't access anything illegal, but she gave me tips on what to look for and how to scrub metadata. She even offered to review the data I'd compiled and suggested what could be considered prosecutable. "If you drop this at the right time," she said, "you won't need to sue. You'll ruin him by reputation alone." That was the goal. I spent the next 2 weeks rebuilding my network quietly. I reached out to clients Greg had wronged, ones I had saved behind the scenes. I didn't ask for favors. I just reminded them what I'd done for them. Many were sympathetic. One even offered me a job on the spot. But I wasn't ready to move on. Not until I finished what I started. My final piece came in the form of a woman named Angela. She was an executive assistant at the downtown office, sharp, observant, and criminally underpaid. We'd shared many late nights ordering takeout and gossiping about upper management. I texted her from a burner number and arranged a meetup in the parking garage under her building. She looked nervous. "I don't want to lose my job, Liv," she said. "You won't," I promised. "But you might help stop a man who's destroyed a lot of good people's careers." Angela hesitated, then handed me a flash drive. "This has board meeting agendas, internal memos, and Greg's calendar logs." I didn't see anything, okay? "Of course," I said, my heart racing. I spent the next 3 nights piecing together a complete picture of Greg's operation, the fake performance metrics, the backdated reports, the personal dinners charged to company cards, the hush payments, the misuse of NDA agreements. I wasn't just holding a folder of dirt, I was holding a bomb. And I knew exactly when to drop it. The firm's annual client conference was coming up in 2 weeks, a big PR event where all the top executives spoke, schmoozed, and boasted about their brilliance. Greg was scheduled to give a keynote on building trust in the digital age. The irony made me sick. That night, I poured a glass of wine, sat at my desk, and drafted the first of several anonymous emails. One to Wallace & Kane's internal audit committee. One to a well-known journalist who covered corporate corruption. And one to Hawthorne's CEO, the client I saved before being thrown to the curb. Each email had a link to a secured drive with labeled evidence. Each was signed simply, "A concerned former employee." As I hit send, I felt the burn in my chest ease, like I had finally exhaled after holding my breath for months. I wasn't afraid anymore. Greg thought he won. He had no idea the game had just begun. The fallout hit like a freight train. Within 24 hours of sending those emails, Wallace & Kane was in chaos. The internal audit team, who had never before shown much urgency, suddenly sprung to life. HR flooded my inbox with vague, concerned employee inquiries, which I ignored. The journalist responded within the hour, asking for a confidential interview. And Hawthorne's CEO? He forwarded my email to his legal team with a curt note, "We will be investigating immediately." Greg didn't answer his phone. Not once. The next morning, the rumor mill started grinding faster than I could keep track of. People whispered in hallways, avoided eye contact in elevators, and some sent passive-aggressive, "hope everything is okay" texts that made me want to laugh out loud. Greg was becoming a ghost, his social media accounts scrubbed clean and his calendar mysteriously empty for the week. I watched the news obsessively, waiting for the first public sign of his unraveling. And it came sooner than I expected. An article dropped on a major business news site, headlined, "Wallace & Kane Executive Faces Internal Fraud Investigation Amidst Client Backlash." The piece was damning, citing anonymous sources, leaked documents, and an insider's tip-off from a disgruntled former employee. The journalist didn't name names, but the entire industry knew who it was about. Within hours, Wallace & Kane's stock price dropped sharply. Clients started requesting emergency meetings. The board scheduled a special session to discuss Greg's future. Even Greg's most loyal allies started distancing themselves, their LinkedIn endorsements quietly disappearing. But the most satisfying moment came when Greg was called into an emergency board meeting. I wasn't there, but I imagined his confident swagger replaced by a nervous tic, beads of sweat on his brow, and a voice that cracked when he tried to defend himself. The man who used me as a shield was now a target. Meanwhile, I started hearing from former colleagues I hadn't spoken to in months. They wanted to thank me, support me, share their own stories of harassment, mismanagement, and cover-ups. Sarah sent me screenshots of HR emails that showed how they tried to silence her. Angela sent a message from her new job, saying she felt safe now to speak out publicly. Even my cousin Nadia got involved, helping me encrypt new evidence and advising me on how to protect my digital footprint from retaliation. She warned me to stay off social media and keep a low profile. But I was too energized to hide. I contacted Evelyn again, who encouraged me to prepare for the legal storm ahead. She helped me draft whistleblower complaints, protected my rights, and assured me I was doing the right thing. Then the worst happened. Greg, cornered and desperate, retaliated. He called a press conference denying everything, claiming malicious lies and an orchestrated smear campaign. He even threatened to sue whoever was behind the leaks for defamation. His tone was bitter, angry, but beneath it, I sensed fear. I felt no sympathy. But the most shocking move was when he tried to pin the entire scandal on me. A leak to HR claimed I had fabricated documents and betrayed company trust. It was a cheap attempt to muddy the waters, discredit me, and shift blame. I expected it. I was ready. I released a statement through my lawyer, professional, calm, and firm, asserting my innocence and inviting an independent investigation. I attached a partial list of the evidence already submitted to the board and promised more to come. Wallace & Kane's board couldn't ignore the mounting pressure. They froze Greg's access to company systems, launched a third-party audit, and suspended him pending investigation. The office atmosphere turned poisonous. Meetings were tense, alliances broke, and every conversation had an edge of fear. Greg's empire was crumbling, brick by brick, and I was the architect. And yet, I stayed silent in public. No interviews, no social media rants, no personal attacks. I wanted to win with facts, not drama. But privately, I celebrated. I poured a glass of whiskey each night, toasted to the truth, and reminded myself of every late night, every sacrifice, and every insult. This was payback, cold, precise, and unstoppable. The board's investigation dragged on for weeks. I worked with auditors, provided more documents, and answered countless questions. Greg fought back with lawyers and PR teams, but every new revelation made his position weaker. Eventually, the inevitable happened. The board voted unanimously to terminate Greg's employment, citing gross misconduct and breach of fiduciary duty. The news spread like wildfire. Greg was finished. But I wasn't done yet. The fire I'd lit was just the beginning. Greg's fall from grace was spectacular, but I knew the real work wasn't over. Firing him was only the first step. I wanted to make sure he never climbed back up again. The man who discarded me like trash needed to feel the full weight of his choices. After the board's decision, I focused on securing my own future. With Evelyn's help, I filed a wrongful termination lawsuit, adding claims for retaliation, discrimination, and constructive dismissal. The legal team was fierce, but I was prepared. I had everything documented, every email, every phone call, every backstab. Word of my lawsuit leaked, and suddenly I was the story everyone wanted to follow, the ex-employee who took down a corporate giant. I ignored the spotlight and stayed focused. My goal wasn't fame, it was justice and rebuilding. That meant rebuilding my career too. I accepted a position at a respected consulting firm recommended by one of my former clients, an opportunity I'd been denied when Greg was in charge. The new role was a fresh start, with a better salary, more respect, and a clear path for advancement. This time, I wasn't just a cog in the machine, I was a key player. At the new firm, I made it clear I wouldn't tolerate toxic behavior or shady deals. My experience had hardened me, and I was ready to protect myself and others. I started mentoring younger colleagues, especially women who reminded me of my old self, ambitious but cautious. Together, we created a network that valued integrity and transparency. Meanwhile, the lawsuit progressed. Depositions, hearings, and negotiations filled my calendar. Greg fought dirty, but the evidence was undeniable. His reputation was ruined beyond repair, and the board publicly distanced themselves from him, apologizing for the oversight. Then came the final settlement meeting. I sat across from Greg's lawyer, a smug man who thought he could intimidate me. I didn't flinch. When the settlement offer came, a figure far higher than I expected, I accepted. Not because of the money, but because it was a public acknowledgement of wrongdoing. As part of the settlement, Greg had to resign from all boards, return company shares, and publicly apologize for his actions. He agreed to never contact me again. That moment felt like victory, the closing of a brutal chapter. But more than that, it was a new beginning. I shared the news with Sarah, Angela, Nadia, and Evelyn, the team that had helped me survive and fight back. We celebrated quietly, knowing that what we'd done wasn't just about me, it was about everyone who had been silenced or pushed aside. Looking back, I realized how much I'd grown. The betrayal, the pain, and the anger had forged me into someone stronger, wiser, and unbreakable. Greg's world had collapsed, but mine was finally rising. I wasn't just the woman he used and discarded, I was the one who took everything from him. And I was just getting started. With Greg gone and the lawsuit settled, the pressure finally eased. For the first time in months, I slept without the weight of fear pressing on my chest. The mornings felt lighter, the future less uncertain. Starting fresh at the consulting firm was more than just a job, it was a second chance. I immersed myself in my work, building relationships, earning trust, and proving my worth on my own terms. The days of being overlooked, used, or discarded were over. I found myself mentoring young women who reminded me of the girl I once was, hopeful but cautious, ambitious but underestimated. I shared my story selectively, warning them about toxic workplaces and encouraging them to trust their instincts and fight for their dignity. Sometimes, I still got angry. The memory of Greg's betrayal burned hot. But I used that fire to fuel my drive, not to consume me. Revenge had been sweet, but growth was sweeter. I focused on my well-being, therapy sessions to process the trauma, yoga classes to center myself, and weekend hikes to reconnect with nature and my own strength. I rediscovered old passions I'd shelved during those stressful years, painting, reading, and traveling. Most importantly, I promised myself I'd never let anyone use me again. Boundaries became my shield. Confidence, my sword. The scars Greg left me were reminders, not of weakness, but of survival and resilience. I didn't know what the future held, but I was ready to face it. No longer a pawn in someone else's game, I was the author of my own story. And from here on out, it was going to be a story of power, respect, and above all, self-worth. Because sometimes, the best revenge isn't tearing someone down, it's building yourself up so high they can never reach you again.